Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to see what if Naruto was saved by the Nine Tails and given Shinigami powers movie. So before we start, please go check out the author of this fanfic, maelstromofire. Link is in the description. Also subscribe to our channel and like this video. So let's begin the video. You're the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Mizuki screamed at the boy who stood in front of him. Or did you think that everyone hates you for some other reason? Didn't you ever wonder why they glared at you? Wouldn't let you near their children? It is because you are the demon that destroyed our village. Naruto slowly sank to the ground. That wasn't true. Mizuki was lying to him. There was no way that he could be the demon fox. Now, said Mizuki, starting to laugh, I will kill you and take the forbidden scroll from you. But you know something about Naruto? The village will thank me for killing the demon brat. And instead of being remembered as the traitor who stole the forbidden scroll, I will be remembered as the hero who killed the demon brat. Naruto looked up, anger showing clearly in his eyes. Mizuki had lied to him. He had thought that Mizuki was his friend, but Mizuki had betrayed him just like everyone else. Team Naruto growled out through clenched teeth. I'm gonna kill you. He covered the distance between himself and Mizuki at a speed that Mizuki's eyes couldn't follow. But Mizuki had already thrown his shuriken. Now you die, demon fox. Naruto saw the giant shuriken headed towards him. He saw the moon glint off the steel blades, and he knew there was no way he could dodge it. He saw his reflection in the shuriken for a split second, saw his eyes flash red, and then nothing. He felt the shuriken cutting into his chest, felt it sever his aorta, and continued up his chest to completely bisect his jugular vein. There was a snick as the rope holding the scroll to his back was cut, and a slight thud as it fell to the ground. But Naruto didn't hear any of that because he was dead before he hit the ground. Naruto awoke floating on his back in the middle of some sort of sewer. He slowly pushed himself upright. He slowly took stock of his surroundings. He seemed to be at the end of a corridor, but most of all, there was a huge cage in front of him with a piece of paper with the word seal on it. All he could see inside the cage was darkness. He stared harder and saw a rustle of movement, and he jumped backwards when a set of blood-red eyes snapped open in front of him. The figure chuckled and spoke in a deep, booming voice. Oh man, you should have seen the look on your face. Priceless. The figure chuckled again, and then suddenly became serious. Who are you? Asked Naruto. How can you not know who I am? I mean, didn't the guy with the silver hair just tell you? Naruto's eyes widened, and he took an involuntary step backwards. The Kyuubi no Kitsune, he breathed. Naruto, we have a lot to talk about, but we don't have time right now. Mizuki's shuriken damaged your internal organ so much that I can't heal them enough to stop you from dying. And even if I could do that, there's no way that I would be able to regenerate enough blood to stop you from dying of blood loss. Naruto looked quickly down at the wounds on his chest. His eyes widened as he saw that there was nothing there, not even a scratch where Mizuki's shuriken had cut him. Here you feel no pain, and any injuries you take in the outside world will not show on your body while we're here. Here, Kyuubi paused Naruto. To stay alive, you must become a Shinigami. There's a burst of hellfire from Kyuubi's body, and for a second Naruto was able to see Kyuubi's full size. As the flames died away, he saw Kyuubi again, but what he saw was not what he had expected. Where Kyuubi had once stood, there now stood a boy of about 16 years old. He was dressed in a black turtleneck with a black jacket over top of it. He had on black cargo pants and black ninja sandals. Kyuubi now had spiky black hair with red tips, and think Ichigo's hairstyle. But what really shocked Naruto was his arm. Not his arm, but what was tied to it. Tied onto the bicep of his right arm was a Konoha Haitai 8. Kyuubi grinned at the shocked expression on Naruto's face, but stopped him as he opened his mouth to ask questions. Like I said, we don't have time to answer questions. Here, take this. He held out his hand, and a katana in a black sheath appeared in his hand. The hilt was bound in black ribbon. This will allow you to become a Shinigami. With that, he threw the katana to Naruto. Naruto caught it with one hand and pulled the blade out of its sheath and examined it. The blade itself was black, but at the base of the handle, there was a ring with a fox tail hanging from it. You must take that sword and plunge it into your chest. Then I will be able to transfer some of my powers to you. That sword will become yours. But if you can master your Ryatsu, you will be able to change its shape and weight. Naruto swiftly plunged the sword into his chest. There was a flash of blue light, and then he was gone. Let's see what you can do, boy. QB slowly walked into the darkness of his cage until his form had completely disappeared. Back in the real world, Mizuki suddenly felt a pulse of energy behind him. As he turned, there was an explosion of black light. "No, it's not possible," yelled Mizuki, his eyes wide. Behind him stood Naruto in a black kimono, with a katana slung over his shoulder. The wind whipped around in a circle before blowing the dust swirling around him outwards. "Oh, it's completely possible, Mizuki team," he paused and put his hand on his chin in a mock thoughtful expression. "I guess since you killed me, I should return the favor." Naruto raced to Mizuki faster than Mizuki's eyes could follow. "How is this possible?" yelled Mizuki, throwing another giant shuriken at him. Naruto pulled his sword in front of him, stopping the shuriken. Naruto swung down and sheared completely through the shuriken. Naruto unknowingly focused his Ryatsu into the blade of his sword and swung his blade at Mizuki. "Zero!" he barked out as he swung his sword at Mizuki. A blade of dark red Ryatsu fired from his sword. Mizuki had time to widen his eyes, and then Zero hit him. The Zero had left a 10-foot-long gash in the ground, but at the end of the ash there was a crater and nothing more. Naruto stared at his sword, which was still smoking from the force of the Zero, and simply said, "That was fucking awesome." Naruto sheathed his sword and ran into the woods before the Anbu could come and question. Naruto threw himself down on his bed. He stared at the katana he had propped against the wall, noticed how the black sheath didn't reflect light at all. In fact, it seemed that I was actually absorbing any light that came near it. Puzzled, Naruto pushed himself upright and walked over to it. Naruto picked up his katana and stared at the sheath for a long moment. He felt himself being pulled toward the sheath and let his consciousness slip into the black. Naruto found himself standing on a sideways building. As he looked around, he saw that he was on a floor of a building that was horizontal instead of vertical. "What the hell?" he wondered aloud. "I am the spirit of you," sword rang a familiar voice. Naruto looked up and saw QB standing in front of him with a grin on his face. "QB, what are you doing here?" QB held up two fingers. "One," he said, putting down a finger, "is because I am the spirit of this word, and two, because now I have time to explain everything to you. Do you understand how it is formed?" Naruto shook his head, not really understanding the importance of the question. "There's a large cycle to follow. First, a human must become a hollow. Then that hollow must eat enough soul to become a Jillian. If that Jillian defeats another Jillian and absorbs its Ryatsu, the Jillian will turn into an Ajuchis. Are you still following me? I'm starting to understand. If you keep explaining, I'm sure I'll get it. Once that Ajuchis swallows a Vasto Lord, then he will experience a tremendous increase in power and become an Arankar." During the entire lesson had been illustrating the process with very poorly drawn pictures, some of which Naruto had to restrain his laughter at. But at this last drawing, he couldn't contain himself. "Holy shit, man, your drawing sucks so bad," he said, trying to breath from laughing so hard. "On with the explanation," QB shouted, trying to get away from the fact that he had no talent when it came to drawing. "Now here is the final step. Listen carefully. If an Arankar eats another Arankar to absorb its power, they will become a..." Just one question. What's a hollow? QB mentally smashed himself in the head. Baka, baka, baka. I can't believe I forgot that part. A hollow is a departed soul that has stayed in despair for too long, or has stayed in the world of the living for too long, in which case a hollow may come to recruit the soul to join its ranks. If you refuse, well, there is no refusal. QB said flatly, "How did you become hollow?" "I died and was taken to Hueco Mundo, where the hollow live." "So you were a leaf shinobi before you died," said Naruto. QB shrugged, "And pretty much lost all your memories after you died." "All I remember is that I had this headband." "You always talk about Ryatsu. What exactly is it?" "Most people only have one energy source in a body, correct? Well, you have three. You have regular chakra, which is the basis or power for ninja. You have demon chakra. And finally, you have a Ryatsu, the basis of Shinigami power. When you used Zero, you unconsciously molded your Ryatsu, forcing it into your sword until it had nowhere else to go, and fired outwards." Naruto's eyes widened. Their sheer amount of abilities he would be able to do, he couldn't comprehend it. QB noticed the boys start to hyperventilate and decided that was enough for today. Naruto, tomorrow I'll teach you how to use your Ryatsu and Demon Chakra, but right now you need to sleep. Besides, you're starting to drool on my floor. Naruto left his mindscape in a daze, still amazed by the sheer amount of energy he would have if he trained all three. He flopped onto his bed for the first time with a smile on his face and fell fast asleep. The next day at the Ninja Academy. So, Naruto remarked to himself, Mizuki is now classified as a missing nun. They believe that he stole the Forbidden Scroll, which means I get to keep it. So why do I have a feeling that today is going to be a bad day? Naruto wondered to himself from his seat next to Sasuke. Suddenly, an excited squealing came from the direction of the door. Oh yeah, fangirls, remembered Naruto with a frown. One particularly ugly, pink-headed girl yelled at him from across the room. Naruto, get away from Sasuke Kun. Sakura screamed at him, running over to punch him in the face for sitting next to her precious Sasuke Kun. As Sakura raised her fist to punch him in the head for sitting next to Sasuke, he moved his head slightly, making the punch miss him completely. As Sakura stood there in shock, wondering how the dead last could dodge her punch so easily, Naruto snapped his hand upwards and grabbed her wrist. Sakura stared in shock. Where there had once been an obnoxious blonde, there now sat a boy with slitted red eyes. With one quick motion, he threw Sakura across the room. Sakura flew through the air. Who is this person? It can't be Naruto. Her train of thought was rudely interrupted as she smashed straight into a wall, leaving a sizable dent where she had hit it. She started to slide down the wall, but before she could, Naruto was right next to her, sword in hand. He grabbed her by the throat and pulled her into a standing position. Haruno, I'm not through with you yet, inclined his head toward her so that only she could hear him as she whispered in her ear, if you ever try to touch me again, I will kill you. Naruto let go of her throat and watched in disgust as she slid down the wall, shivering uncontrollably with fear. Naruto walked calmly back to his seat, looked at Sasuke, whose respect had risen for putting Sakura in her place, and said, Hey Sasuke. Sasuke looked back at Sakura, who was shaking in the fetal position, mumbling gibberish. Holy shit, dude, I think you broke her. Ino came over to yell at Naruto for doing something like that to Sakura, but stopped when Naruto stared at her, eyes devoid of any emotion except hate. As Naruto opened his mouth, the door burst open, and Iruka walked in the door. All right, class, sat down, and shut. He trailed off as he saw that everyone was simply staring at Naruto. He looked quickly around the room and saw Sakura rolling on the floor, still spouting incoherent sentences. Okay, he said, looking at the students in the classroom. All right, let's get ready for class, he said, completely ignoring the gibbering Sakura in the corner. As Iruka was about to begin the lesson, he kept getting interrupted by Sakura's mumbling. Will someone please shut her up? He yelled over the noise of the class. Naruto was getting pissed off at how weak Sakura was and sent a small amount of killing intent at her, just enough to snap her out of her trance. As Sakura looked around the room, her eyes landed on Naruto. She immediately screamed and went back into the fetal position, gibbering once more. Naruto just groaned for love when he walked over to Sakura and smacked her between the eyes with the butt of his sword. Her eyes rolled up in her head, and she slumped on the floor, unconscious. Naruto left her on the floor and walked calmly back to his seat. Right, said Iruka. Resuming his lesson today will be the makeup examination for those of you that didn't pass yesterday. Unfortunately, Naruto, you're the only one who didn't pass yesterday. You failed miserably at target practice, hinge, and bunshin. Iruka-sensei said to Naruto that I still can't do regular bunshin, but I read that I could take a battle examination to prove that I am ready to become a shinobi. Iruka was shocked that Naruto had read the rulebook that thoroughly, but conceded. All right, Naruto met me outside, said Iruka as he shoe-shined outside the classroom. Naruto simply jumped out the window as the class filed out the door to watch the battle. In the sparring arena, be careful, Iruka-sensei. I won't hold back this time. Iruka simply smiled. Naruto started bouncing on the balls of his feet. Here I come, he yelled. Naruto disappeared from sight, reappearing in front of Iruka to throw a punch at his head. Iruka moved his head to the left, barely dodging. How did Naruto get this good? His train of thought was cut off as Naruto disappeared again. Where is he? Boy, Iruka-sensei. You've gotten slow, said Naruto from behind him. Iruka dropped low and did a sweeping kick to take out the ankles of the boy behind him, but connected with nothing. Iruka's eyes widened slightly at the thought that Naruto could dodge an attack like that so quickly. Suddenly, Iruka felt Naruto standing with his back touching Iruka's. He turned his head slightly and whispered in Iruka's ear, "Stop holding back. Give me everything you've got. Fight with the intent to kill." Naruto jumped away and turned to face Iruka. Smiling, he turned to face his mentor. Still smiling, he simply said, "Now the fight really begins." Both fighters disappear from the eyes of those who were watching the fight, except perhaps Sasuke's. There was a clash of metal on steel, and Iruka and Naruto both reappeared in the center of the arena, sparks flying off their kunai, as each sought for a weak spot in the other's defense. Suddenly, Naruto spotted something. He pulled another kunai from his pouch and held it in his free hand. Naruto began to launch a fury of attacks, making Iruka switch from offensive to defensive in a split second. Naruto kept hammering at Iruka's defense and launched another flurry of blows with his kunai before lashing out with a sidekick that sent Iruka flying. Naruto disappeared and reappeared behind Iruka with his kunai at Iruka's throat. "So do I pass?" he asked with a smile on his face. Naruto let the kunai drop to the floor and helped Iruka to his feet. "Yes," Naruto Iruka answered with a smile on his face. "Come inside, we have to get you your headband." Iruka led Naruto into the classroom while the rest of the class followed, staring in shock, and then an ugly pink-haired Banshee decided to break the silence. And then Sakura decided to wake up. Naruto cheated. She yelled at a pitch that left all the dogs in the village whimpering and the genin in front of her writhing on the floor, holding their ears and screaming about bursted eardrums. Naruto smiled as Iruka handed him the headband and headed back to his seat, noticing Saki's jealous look. Smiling, he took his seat next to Sasuke and stared at him. Sasuke stared back. "Is there a reason you're staring at me, or are you gay like most of us suspect?" That shocked Sasuke. The stoic look on his face crumbled and gave way to shock, his eyes somewhat bulging. "You guys think I'm gay?" he shouted to the class. All the guys nodded their heads while the girls screamed that there was no way that their Sasuke-kun could be gay. Naruto continued. "I mean, yeah, of course they think you're gay. I mean, you're always running away from all those fangirls. What other possible reason is?" For the first time since Naruto had met him, he saw him shudder. "You have no idea. All they want is sex. They think that sneaking into my room and stealing my clothes and cutting off pieces of my hair to show to their friends is a way to show that they love me. Every day they follow me home. I have to change every time I walk home to avoid being followed." Naruto shuddered. That would be so bad. But in an instant, Sasuke reverted back to his cold exterior, and Naruto saw jealousy flashing in his eyes. "All right, everyone, tomorrow you will meet with your joining instructors and will be assigned into 3-man cells." He paused for a second and yelled in his patented big head, "Now go home." Naruto simply stood from his seat and walked home. Naruto wandered the streets, trying to buy some time before he went back to that hellhole he called his apartment. He looked to the west for a moment, saw the sun setting, and decided it was time to head home. As he walked home, Naruto noticed a chakra signature following him. It was muffled, and he couldn't determine who was following him, but knew from experience that it was a ninja trying to cover their chakra signature. "Well, Saki, do you want to explain why you're following me home?" he asked without turning around. If Sasuke was shocked that Naruto knew he was following, he didn't show it, as he jumped down from the building he was on and landed in front. He stared at the blonde for a minute before speaking. "You don't deserve that power," he said with a scowl. "I need that power to kill my older brother and avenge my clan." Naruto frowned. "Now why is it that everything you say pisses me off?" he asked with a genuine look of confusion on his face. He began tapping the fronts of his sandals on the ground. "Well, whatever. If it's a fight you want, then that is something I'm more than willing to do." Sasuke said nothing, simply slipping into his family's taijutsu stance. Naruto scoffed. "You really think that pathetic clan taijutsu can defeat me?" Naruto shook his head. "No matter what, man, it's your funeral." Naruto shot at Sasuke without warning, throwing a punch at his head that Sasuke quickly dodged before countering with his own punch. Naruto knocked the punch away with his arm and kneed him in the gut. Sasuke doubled over, breathless. How could this one get so much better than me? He's dead last. Naruto simply took a few steps back and waited for Sasuke to regain his breath. Sasuke stops. You'll only get beaten. Sasuke got even madder and charged at Naruto. I see, said Naruto, sighing. I was hoping it wouldn't come to this, but if you won't listen to reason, I'll just have to beat it into you. Naruto disappeared for a second, reappearing in front of Sasuke before shouting, I'll stop you even if I have to break your arms and legs. Sasuke threw a punch at Naruto, only for Naruto to dodge it with ease. He brought his knee up to catch Naruto in his gut, but Naruto's knee came up and blocked his. Sasuke threw a kick with his right leg, but Naruto's arm caught it and pinned it to his side. Sasuke brought his left leg up in a kick, making his body completely parallel to the ground. Sasuke swung his leg at Naruto's shoulder, hoping to shatter his collarbone. Naruto blocked Sasuke's kick with his forearm, knocking Sasuke off balance. He quickly released Sasuke's leg and jumped backwards before Sasuke could launch another counterattack. Sasuke managed to righten himself in midair and landed lightly on feet. Sasuke ran at Naruto once more, trying again to defeat the blonde. Naruto simply looked down, his eyes hidden by his blonde hair. Fine, he said slowly, then let's finish this. He shouted, looking up, his blue eyes shone with determination as he looked at Sasuke. Sasuke tried to kick Naruto in the head with a spin kick, only to have it blocked by Naruto's arm. Naruto punched Sasuke in the chest, sending the Avenger back a few feet. Naruto charged at Sasuke and punched him 3 times in the chest before bringing his right leg up in a spin kick that caught Sasuke in the chin. Naruto pivoted on his left foot, bringing his right foot down lower to cut Sasuke's legs out from under him. As Sasuke was in the air, Naruto palm-heeled him in the chin, knocking him straight up into the air. As Sasuke's body was parallel to the ground, Naruto jumped into the air after him, kneeing him in the back so Sasuke was bent over Naruto's knee. Naruto backflipped over Sasuke and delivered a crescent kick to his gut, sending him slamming into the ground. Naruto fell to the ground and landed next to the Sasuke-shaped crater in the ground. Smiling, he looked down at Sasuke. That's my new technique, Hurricane Kick. Leaning down, he reaches out his hand to help Sasuke up, only to have Sasuke knock it away. There's no way I could have lost, shouted Sasuke as he struggled to stand. Has all my training been for nothing? He glared at the ground. How can I hope to be my brother if I'm this weak? He asked softly. Damn it, shouted and walked away. Naruto watched Sasuke walk away with an impassive face. Only his eyes showed that he was truly sad. Naruto turned and walked away to his apartment. If Sasuke had chosen to look back, he would have seen the blonde drag a hand across his eyes. Naruto's apartment. As Naruto sat on his bed, he thought about Sasuke's problem. To only want one thing in life, but to lack the power to accomplish it, he thought somberly. He rolled over in his bed and fell asleep, his mind still troubled. As Naruto sat up in bed, he felt that something was turned so that his legs were hanging off the yelp as they touched the cold floor. He stood up, noticing that he was at least 6 inches taller than he had been the day before. And most uncomfortably of all, that none of his clothes fit. QB, what's going on? Well, you'd better just go look in the mirror. Naruto was nervous. QB had sounded almost scared. He shook his head. Nothing could scare QB. He was the king of hell. He went to the mirror, and what he saw made his jaw drop. He had gained 7 inches, making him 5 feet 7 inches, lost all traces of baby fat, making his face look more defined, almost regal. He now had a six-pack and was much stronger than he could ever remember being before. But on top of his head were silver fox ears. His hair was now shot with streaks of silver, but swishing behind him was a silver fox tail. QB, he thought slowly, what the hell did you do to me? Well, I guess when you absorbed my Ryatsu, it kind of provided a kick to your system and made you grow a lot faster than normal. As for the foxtail and ears, I guess that's because I'm a fox. Naruto's breathing slowed back to a normal pace. Okay, I'll just hide them with a hinge. Naruto put his hands in a ram seal hinge. There was a puff of smoke, and the fox ears and tail were gone. Okay, now all I need is a pair of clothes that fit. Naruto felt his hands move on their own, his body calling out the seals as he made them Ryu, Torai, Hibi, Hitsuji. There was a puff of smoke in front of him, and a set of clothes appeared in front of him. A voice whispered in his head, "Just for the record, I can do that whenever I want." Naruto quickly checked out the clothes before putting each piece of clothing on. Black shinobi pants with multiple pockets. The pockets had blank scrolls in them that had medical tape at the bottom. There were black combat boots, steel-toed, with slots in the sides to hold kunai. There was a red shirt that showed off his new muscles, and over top of all that there was a black trench coat. Naruto quickly slipped on the clothes, but left the trench coat at home. As he jumped over the rooftops on his way to the academy, he reflected on his fight against Iruka the day before. Should I have really shown them that much of my power? I wouldn't really worry about it. What's done is done. Naruto nodded and moved even faster toward the academy. At the academy, Naruto walked into the academy and took his seat next to Sasuke, ignoring the glares from the fangirls. He looked at Sasuke, whose wounds had healed up rather quickly. Naruto smiled at Sasuke, and then all hell broke loose. Sasuke smiled back. Naruto yelled and ran under the desk. Sasuke smiled. It's a sign of the apocalypse. Everyone to the bunkers. Everyone started screaming and running around like chickens with their heads cut off. And I hate chickens, those beady little eyes. Iruka burst open the classroom door. All right, everyone sit down and shut up. Everyone quieted down and went back to their seats. Today, he continued, you will be split into your 3-man teams. Your joining instructors will be arriving shortly, so I'll announce the teams now. Naruto laid his head on the desk, waiting until his name was called. Amazingly, no one had noticed the changes yet. Team 7, Uzumaki Naruto. Naruto raised his head in acknowledgement. Hinata looked at his face and almost fainted. The blush on her cheeks at the moment could make a tomato run away in shame. Uchiha Sasuke. Iruka continued. Sasuke merely nodded his head, and Hyuga Hinata. Hinata gasped and actually fainted at the news. Nobody seemed to notice except Naruto. He smiled faintly and looked back at Iruka. Team 8, Aburame Shino, Inuzuka Kiba, and he looked down at the list and visibly cringed. Haruno Sakura. Both Kiba and the normally stoic Shino slammed their heads down on the desks, cursing whatever Kami had seen fit to punish them so severely. There was a giant sneeze that shook the academy building. Kami. He sneezed again, and in a ringing voice exclaimed, I fucking hate flu season. The academy, 3 hours later. Naruto groaned for probably the 3rd time that hour. Man, this sucks. Everyone else's senseis came to get them 2 hours ago. Sasuke nodded. Hinata was still unconscious. Naruto glanced over at her before looking back at Sasuke. Do you think we should do something about her? He asked, jerking his head toward Hinata. Sasuke shook his head. Just leave her there. Naruto just shrugged his shoulders and put his head back onto the desk. Suddenly the door opened and a silver-haired stuck his head inside. You guys team 7? He asked. Naruto and Sasuke just nodded. Roof, 5 minutes. Naruto sighed. With a grin at Sasuke, he slung Hinata over his shoulder and shushed Sp to the roof. Leave poor emo Sasuke to walk to the roof all by himself. On the roof, Naruto appeared on the roof in a swirl of leaves and set Hinata on the bench next to him and tried to wake her up. He tried shaking her, he tried shouting at her. Hell, he even poured water on her. Finally, in a fit of desperation, he said, making his voice high in terror, Hinata, help me. The evil pink hair bitch is trying to rape me. Hinata sat bolt upright, instantly awake, with her blazing in a complete stance. Stupid banshee, stay away from Naruto, she shouted, only to find that there was no one else on the roof except for her and Naruto. She cocked her head to the side in confusion, but before she could ask a question, Naruto answered her. Well, I couldn't find any other way to wake you up, so I sort of had to make something up, he said, chuckling nervously and scratching the back of his head with his hand. Hinata sat upright and nodded. Sasuke opened the door and stepped out onto the roof, squinting at the sudden sunlight. He walked and took his seat next to Naruto and waited for their sensei to appear. Kakashi appeared in a swirl of leaves, much like Naruto had. With his trademark eye smile, he said, I'm bored. Come here tomorrow around noon. Yone. Before either Naruto or Sasuke could stop him, he disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto shook his head slowly. Do you mean to tell me that we waited 3 hours for this guy, and then he just up and left? Sasuke nodded slowly. Naruto erupted in a fit of cussing that made Hinata turn pink and put her hand over her mouth in astonishment at some of the words he used. Naruto slammed his fist into the wall, and for a second, nothing happened. Then the entire wall crumbled away under the force of his blow. Screw this, I'm leaving. He disappeared in another swirl of leaves, leaving Hinata and Sasuke to wonder where he had gone. Training Ground 7. Naruto pummeled at the targets he had set up with a rain of blows that shook the earth that the posts were slammed into. With a final heavy kick, he snapped the 3-foot-thick post he'd tied the dummy to and sent it skidding across the training ground. Why was he so angry? He didn't understand it. I can say that QB's voice rang in his head while our minds and body were connected. Our emotions are, as well. I am angry at that man, as well, and so it affects your anger, as well. Naruto now nodded, understanding his anger. He focused his anger into a point and used it to make himself stronger, feeling it draining away as he pummeled dummy after dummy. He finished off a training dummy with a rotating palm, shock to the chest stopped. Feeling a familiar chakra signature behind him, he turned around and asked, "Hinata, what are you doing here?" Hinata stepped out from behind the tree she was hiding behind and stood in front of Naruto, fidgeting her fingers. Frowning, he took her hands and put them by her sides. She put his finger on her chin and pushed her up so that she locked eyes with him. He smiled. "That's much better," he said. "Now," he said, stepping back, "why are you here? You seem to be in a bad mood, so I decided to come after you." She stuttered out. Naruto frowned. She had a serious confidence problem. He would have to help remedy that. Once she had seen him frown, she started stammering out apologies, thinking that she had done something to offend him. Naruto held up a hand to stop her stammering. He gave her a warm smile and held out his hand to her. "Hinata, would you like to train with me?" Hinata nodded, unable to speak at the thought that Naruto would ask her to train with him. "Hinata, the best way to determine what I need to teach you is to figure out what you already know, so I want you to attack me." Hinata nodded shakily and ran to attack him. He dodged the first few strikes easily and could tell that her heart just wasn't into attacking him. He grabbed her hand as she attacked and set it by her side. Hinata, she squeezed her eyes closed and braced herself for the hit to come. The hit that always came when she didn't do something right. But the hit didn't come. She opened her eyes to find Naruto face to face with her, with a look of concern on his face. "Hinata, are you all right?" Hinata was surprised you weren't going to hit me. Naruto's eyes widened, and he asked in confusion, "Hit you? Why would I do something like that?" Hinata shook her head in confusion, but I failed. She couldn't understand. Naruto's eyes narrowed. This girl had been badly mistreated. "Hinata," he said softly, causing her to open her eyes. "I would never hit you, not ever." He straightened out to normal height and began again. "Come at me and fight." Hinata ran forward again, this time with more conviction in her eyes, and Naruto was hard-pressed to dodge many of her strikes. He held up his hand, his assessment done. "Your style is far different from any other style I have seen before, and I'm hard-pressed to figure out something that would help you." "What are you talking about? There's only one style of..." Naruto shook his head. "There is one style, but everyone uses it differently. It's the same style, but everyone adapts it to their own style of fighting." He saw her nod and continued. "Your style involves quick strikes to vital body parts before spinning away and striking at another section of the body. Your style appears to be the most effective style I have ever seen. Yours allows you to strike multiple vulnerable points all over your opponents while keeping out of the way of your opponent's attacks." Naruto smiled. "That's why there is only one technique that I can think of right now that would complement your style. It's called the chakra scalpel. It's an incredibly damaging ability when used in conjunction with the chakra scalpel cuts through the inside organs without rupturing the skin outside the body. Coupled with the already striking vital points, it would do massive damage to your enemy's internal organs." Hinata was in shock. She would never have thought of combining the chakra scalpel with the stance. What was more impressive was that no one else had either. "Now, prepare yourself. If you can land 5 hits on me, then I'll teach it to you," he said, slipping into a fighting stance. He would teach it to her even if she couldn't, but she didn't need to know that yet. And finally, Hinata came at him with the intent to kill. Naruto smiled. So Hinata had finally come at him with the intent to kill. He dodged her first few strikes, by simply bending his body, but he knew she was just getting warmed up. She suddenly dropped into a leg sweep to try and take his feet out, but he jumped into the air and dodged it. She thrust her palm into the air to hit him in the chin, but he leaned back and was able to dodge it. She shot her palm to catch him in the chest, but Naruto twisted his body in midair and dodged the strike. He threw a kick at Hinata, but she spun away to the right and closed multiple on his arms. He grunted in pain and jumped away, his arms numb from the elbows down. As she raced forward to strike again, he forced chakra to his heels and jumped straight up into the air. Wanting to buy some time so he could reopen, he spun his foot and revealed a hidden kunai in the sole of his sandal. It flew into the air where he caught it in his mouth. He landed on the ground with a slight thud. He smiled. Hinata had no idea how strong she really was. She could see the points in the middle of the fight. She could dodge his hits and counterattack with her own easily. She even made him unable to use his arms. She just needed to know how strong she really was. He tossed the kunai to the side and called for her to stop. He was able to slightly move his arms again and use the other arm to unseal the points on each of his arms. He may not have but he knew exactly where they were. He had been attacked by Hyugas many times before. He called Hinata next to him and had her sit down with him. "Hinata, you're insanely strong." She shook her head. "No, Tusan says I'm nothing but a waste of space, that I'll never amount to anything." Naruto's eyes narrowed, and he looked her in the eyes. "Hinata, don't listen to him. I fought Sasuke yesterday, and he wasn't able to land a single hit on me before I took him down. But you, Hinata," he said, incredibly proud of her. "You managed to land 6 hits on both my arms and force me to use my mouth to attack." She blushed at his praise and turned away. Naruto pulled out one of the scrolls in his pocket and opened it. He bit his thumb and smeared blood down the scroll. There was a poof, and when the smoke cleared, it revealed a bento box. "No, Hinata, you want some lunch?" he asked, holding the box in front of her. She shook her head nervously. "Oh no, you see I'm not all that hun." She was interrupted when her stomach growled loudly. She gave a squeak and covered her face in embarrassment. Naruto laughed and opened his bento box. As soon as she looked up, he popped a piece of dango in her mouth. He laughed even harder at the look of astonishment on her face. She chewed and swallowed it, her eyes lighting up at its taste. "Wow, Naruto-kun, this is great. Where did you get this?" He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "Actually, I made it." Hinata's eyes opened wide so that he could cook so well. He rose to his feet and held out his hand to help her up. "Well, Lady Hinata, as much of a pleasure as this has been, it seems to be getting late." Hinata turned to look at the sun and saw that it had sunk very low in the sky. Hinata gave a gasp. When had it gotten so late? "Hinata, come on, I'll walk you home." He turned and started to walk towards the Hyuga compound, Hinata following after him. He tossed her a pair of chopsticks that she caught with surprised hands. "Eat up," he said, turning to her with a smile on his face. Hinata opened the box and started to eat the food as they walked to the Hyuga compound, occasionally commenting on this and that. As they reached the main gates, she pushed open the gates and gave the bento box back to Naruto. "Goodbye, Hinata-chan," he said softly as she walked off so she wouldn't hear him. Suddenly, Hyuga clansmen poured out of the building and surrounded him. "Demon, how dare you come here with Hinata-sama? We'll kill you for what you did to our clan members," shouted the lead Hyuga. Naruto's cerulean blue eyes turned hard and became like shards of ice. "All right, if you and the rest of the village think of me as a demon, then I'll show you just what a demon can do." He dashed forward and planted his fist in the Hyuga's stomach, sending him flying into a tree where he slumped, unconscious. Naruto stood back and slipped into a fighting stance. Hinata turned to see Naruto being attacked and could only look on in fear as she saw him slip into a defensive stance. Naruto deflected a punch from the nearest Hyuga and hit in the gut with an elbow before transferring his motion into a spinning kick that caught another Hyuga in the back of the head. He swept another's legs out from under him before hitting him with a palm shock to the chest, sending him flying back into the Hyugas behind him. Naruto sent another into the air with an uppercut to the chin, where he slammed him back into the ground with an axe kick to the sternum. The man's eyes rolled back into his head, and he slid into unconsciousness. Though he didn't see it, Naruto was being very careful in this fight, If he took a single hit, it would allow them all to attack him while he was numbed. A Hyuga dashed forward and tried to punch him, but Naruto sidestepped and kicked him in the side of the knee, breaking his leg. Another tried to attack him from behind, but he ducked under the blow to face his opponent. He grabbed the man's wrist and gave it a sharp 90-degree twist, effectively breaking it. As the man yelled in pain, Naruto sent a palm to the man's elbow, snapping it. As the man fell screaming to the ground, Naruto kicked him in the chest, breaking at least 6 ribs and sending the man flying into the tree behind him. Things broke, they weren't branches. As Naruto stood back up, a Hyuga tried to hit him in the heart, only to find that his target had disappeared. Below him, there was a cry of Jitenjiku Kage Shige. 1. The man looked down just in time to have a rotating heel kick catch him in the forehead. The man stumbled backwards from the force of the blow and gave the boy below him enough time to jump upright. The blonde followed with a series of punches to the man's chest before ending with a vicious right-handed cross that sent him skidding across the ground. Naruto slipped into his fighting stance once again before a loud voice interrupted them. Stop, shouted a loud voice as Hiyashi Hyuga came striding across the courtyard. All the Hyugas present parted before him, but Naruto just stared at him with cold hatred. So this is the man that made Hinata so afraid. I'll make him pay. What are you doing here, boy? Hiyashi asked in a cold voice, as he looked up at Naruto with disdain in his eyes. Naruto's anger flared as he stared at this man, but he restrained it and bowed. I was bringing your daughter home, sir. Hiyashi nodded, but he said, where's Hanabi then? Naruto was confused. Your other daughter, sir, said Naruto. Hiyashi scoffed, what daughter? I have no other daughter. Naruto's anger flared to a new height, and he was barely able to grind out, as you say, sir. He turned and walked down the street, away from the Hyuga compound. Naruto walked down the streets of Konoha, pissed beyond belief. Fucking asshole, he shouted into the air. If I was stronger, I could have fought him, but I'm too weak. Damn it, he shouted, kicking a nearby tree and watching in satisfaction as it splintered under the blow. The next day, on top of the academy building, Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke all sat on the benches staring at their sensei. All right, said Kakashi. Today we're going to learn something about each other. So tell me your likes, dislikes, and dreams. That'll go first so you guys know what to do. My name is Hatake Kakashi. I like many things, but also dislike many others. As for dreams, well, I have plenty of hobbies. His team stared dumbfounded, but inwardly they were all screaming the same thing. All we learned was his name. Okay, you first, timid dark girl. My name is Hyuga Hinata. She was tempted to say Naruto-kun, but decided against it. Cinnamon buns, training, and helping people. I dislike people who judge on a person's potential instead of their ability to grow. And my dream is to unite both the main and branch families. You next, emo boy. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I like some things, but dislike many others. My dream is not to kill a certain man. I hope it's not me, said Naruto in a mock-scared voice. Sasuke growled. I'm thinking of changing it to you. Okay, Blondie, you next. Naruto frowned at the nickname, but continued nevertheless. My name is Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen and training. I dislike bigoted bastards who blame people for things they had no control over. Oh, and the council members, don't forget them. Where was I? Oh yeah, and my dream is to become Hokage. Kakashi thought to himself. Okay, so I've got 2 Taijutsus on my team. One belongs to an Avenger, but the girl, I don't know what to make of her, as well as the blonde kid. Okay, everyone meet me at the training ground 7 tomorrow at 6:00 sharp. We'll be doing survival training, so don't eat breakfast. You'll just throw up. Ja-ini with that, he teleported off to who knows where. Naruto stood up and stretched. Well, I'm off to train. You want to come with me, Hinata? Hinata blushed that he would ask her to train with him, but nodded her head. Sasuke stood up and said slowly, I'd like to train as well. Naruto nodded, but you'll have to get there by yourself. Naruto walked over to Hinata and put an arm on her shoulder. Hinata blushed at the sudden contact, but remained conscious. See a bit, Sasuke. The leaves started to swirl around Naruto. The leaves suddenly burst into flames. When the flames disappeared, there was no Naruto or Hinata. Sasuke stared open-mouthed at the spot. Naruto and Hinata were just standing and said, damn, that was badass. Training ground 7. There was a burst of flame, and Naruto, and Hinata appeared in the middle of the training field, Hinata still clutching Naruto in fear. Naruto rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Gomen, Hinata, she slowly released him before asking Naruto-kun, what was that? HM? Oh, that was a burning leaf shushin, something that I've been working on for a while now. Naruto sat on the ground, pulling one of the storage scrolls from his pockets. He motioned for her to sit down next to him. He unfolded the scroll and unsealed it. There were multiple poofs and weapons appeared on the scroll. Hinata, I want you to pick the weapon you'd like to use, and we'll see if we can't find someone to teach you the basics. I can teach weapon styles. I know you know a lot of weapon styles, but she doesn't know about you, so I have to make it seem like I can find her a teacher. There was a silence that Naruto took for Kyuubi being done talking. Hinata's eyes scanned the various weapons until she found something she liked. But when she saw it, her eyes lit up, and Naruto knew she had chosen her weapon. Hinata picked up the large scythe and planted it in the ground next to her as she stood. Naruto looked at her weapon choice and remarked to Scythe, you know, a person's weapon determines what they wish to emulate. That scythe is large, and few have mastered it. So if you were to master it, it would make you stand out and be noticed. Hinata's eyes widened as Naruto's words rang true inside of her. Once she mastered this weapon, then no one would ever be able to pass her off as a nobody again. However, he continued, you don't know how to use it, so I suggest you seal it inside until you learn how to use it, otherwise it will only impede your movements. He said, tossing her storage scroll. Hinata caught it and opened it, bit her thumb, and ran the blood down the scroll. Chakra leaked out of the scroll and wrapped around the scythe in her hand. There was a poof as it disappeared into the scroll, then the scroll rolled shut. Hinata picked up the scroll from the ground and placed it in her jacket pocket as Sasuke walked into the training ground. Took you long enough to get here, Naruto shouted to Sasuke from across the training ground. As Sasuke got closer, Naruto resumed talking. We're picking weapons to use. Hinata picked a scythe. I've already got a sword, which leaves you. Sasuke looked over the weapons in the scroll before picking up a long spear. Hinata voiced a question that had been nagging at her since Naruto had opened the scroll. Naruto-kun, where did you get all those weapons? Well, that was the easy part, said Naruto laughing. I just changed into Sasuke and walked into the nearest weapon store, and they gave me everything I picked out for free instead of 4 times the normal price. He grumbled the last part so his teammates wouldn't hear. Sasuke, you should do that sometime. Just walk into the store and be like, I'd like everything you have in stock, please. I'm sure they'd give it to you free of charge. Naruto laughed while Sasuke just shook his head. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Here, he said, tossing Sasuke a storage scroll. Sasuke sealed his spear in the scroll, while Naruto gave him the same explanation he gave Hinata. Sasuke nodded. That makes sense, I guess. Otherwise, our opponent can just use our weapons against us. Naruto nodded. Everyone, I've copied down a few that I'd like you to try and learn. He didn't mention that he'd gotten these from the Forbidden Scroll, which he only took after making sure that the Hokage had a second one. But before I give you guys those to practice, I want you to learn Kage Bunshin, which is essentially a solid clone with reconnaissance abilities, so it will greatly speed up your training if you use it while you train. Hinata and Sasuke nodded, giving Naruto the signal to continue. The clones give you back all the information that they gathered after they're dispelled. So if you're training with a lot of them, dispel them one by one, because if you don't, the rush of information will cause you to black out. Basically, if you had 3 clones doing the same, as soon as you dispel them, the information on how to do them will be in your head, because you basically just did it 3 times. Naruto grinned as he watched Hinata, and Sasuke's eyes widened as they thought of the possibilities. First, put your hands in the ram seal, then focus your chakra as you imagine it splitting away from you in as many clones as you want. The clones split you chakra amongst themselves evenly, so the less clones you have, the higher their durability. Make 1 for right now. As your chakra reserves grow, you'll be able to do more and more easily. Sasuke and Hinata nodded and set to work on learning the Kage Bunshin. Sasuke practiced for a while before coming over to Naruto. Naruto, why do you want to teach me the Kage Bunshin? Naruto smiled. Well, Mr. Avenger, you're going to need power if you want to kill that brother of yours, aren't you? Sasuke's eyes widened as he realized that Naruto knew about Itachi. He guessed that wasn't the real reason that Naruto was teaching him, but decided to let it go and walked away. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief. Boy, if he ever found out that I was training him because I thought he had talent, his ego would blow up so big I don't think I'd ever be able to deflate it. Naruto walked off by himself and reviewed one of the ones he'd copied from the brought with him. Opening the scroll, he breathed Rasengan. Naruto looked at what he had copied with anticipation. Soon he would know an A rank. He smiled to himself and reread the description. Rasengan, created by the Yondaime Hokage. This is one of the most versatile in the shinobi world, as it can be infused with multiple chakra elements. This is done by swirling the chakra in the user's hand in several different directions to keep the chakra contained and not allow it to escape. The swirling chakra creates a grinding effect that will tear through most objects. Naruto grinned. This certainly was powerful. Notes on elemental infusion. Elemental chakra must be molded. As the Rasengan is being created, trying to add elements after that has been formed will cancel the. No shinobi to date has been able to infuse elements into the Rasengan. Naruto frowned at this last bit, so it would indeed be very difficult to do. Naruto rolled up the scroll and slipped it into his pocket. Naruto slid his hands into a ram seal and shouted Kage Bunshin no. 30 clones flickered into existence next to him. He started to channel chakra into his hand, only for it to dissipate. He frowned and tried again, all of his clones swirling as well. The chakra started to swirl again before dissipating again. He yelled in frustration before slipping the scroll out of his pocket. He scanned the words with his finger before finding a passage that could explain it. The Rasengan requires precise chakra control to do, as you must swirl it in different ways. Once you have mastered your chakra control, there are multiple steps you could do to help control the chakra inside the Rasengan. Naruto looked at the scroll again before rolling it up and placing it back in his pocket. If I can't learn Rasengan yet, there must be something else that I can do. He decided to check the scroll again once he got home and decided to go with his training routine. Kakebunsin no. Hinata and Sasuke felt the giant chakra spike and ran over to see what was wrong, but all they could do was gasp at what they saw. Naruto stood in the center of a giant circle of shadow clones. Hinata easily counted over 300. The clones all pulled out kunai and charged at Naruto with a deafening roar. Hinata screamed. There was no way he could defeat that many. Naruto would be killed. She ran forward to help him, but Sasuke held out an arm to stop her. Wait, he said, watch him. One of the clones threw its kunai at Naruto. Naruto spun out of the way and grabbed the kunai by its handle, throwing it back at the clone and catching it in the chest. 6 clones rushed Naruto from behind, but he flipped over them, grabbing one of their kunai and ramming it in the back of the clone's skull. He took the kunai and blurred away, reappearing behind a pocket of clones. There was a series of proofs as the clones disappeared. Hinata and Sasuke could only watch in amazement as he systematically destroyed all of the clones. As the last clone disappeared, Naruto fell to the ground, panting. He started to push himself off the ground, only for his arms to give way and make him collapse onto the tried to push himself off the ground, only for a hail of kunai to pin him to the ground by the edges of his shirt. Sasuke looked down at him. When you can take out all of those kunai, then you can get up. Sasuke started to walk away. As soon as Sasuke was out of sight, Naruto realized something. Sasuke, you pinned both my arms to the ground. Naruto turned his head and saw Hinata standing next to him. Ano, Hinata, could you take out these kunai? Hinata was still laughing at the sight of Naruto pinned to the ground, but came over and pulled out the kunai. Naruto just laid there for a while, trying to gain back his stamina. Finally, Naruto was able to prop himself up on one arm, laughing at his own weakness. Hinata reached down a hand and helped him up, blushing at the contact. Naruto pulled himself upright, leaning heavily against Hinata for support. She was able to hold him up and walked over to a tree so he could lean on it. As she set him at the tree, he slumped into a sitting position at the base of the tree. He laughed. Pretty weak, huh? Hinata shook her head. No way, Naruto-kun was amazing. He laughed again. But look at me now. I'm completely beat. Hinata just sat down next to him. Naruto, why did my clan attack you yesterday? Naruto's eyes clouded over in sorrow. They attacked me over something I had no control over. What about Naruto? She asked, genuinely concerned. He shook his head. I can't tell you yet. Not till I'm sure you're not like all the rest. Hinata was confused but let it go, deciding that he'd tell her when he was ready. Naruto gave a giant yawn, stretching his arms over his head. He set them back down by his sides, his eyelids half closed. His last thought was, I must have overdone it. As he awoke, he noticed he was laying on something, but wasn't sure what it was. He sat back up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He looked over to see Hinata asleep next to him. Looking around, he realized that they were still in the same spot where he fell asleep. He looked at the sun, or rather the moon. His eyes widened. How long had he been asleep? He shook Hinata to wake her up, but she was fast asleep. He knew he couldn't let Hayashi see him bring her home this late. He gathered her in his arms and set off towards the Hyuga compound. Naruto leapt over the fence to the compound, searching the filled rooms for an empty one that could be Hinata's. As he scanned the compound, he saw that there was a room that was unoccupied. Jumping towards it, he passed directly over a squad of guards. Naruto snorted, all-seeing eye to my ass. Naruto got to the window and immediately knew it was Hinata's. He opened the window and slipped quietly inside. He laid her on the bed, taking her arms from around his neck and whispering to her good night, Hinata-chan. He jumped out the window, closing it as he left. The bridge, 6 a.m. Sasuke and Hinata stood on the bridge, waiting for Naruto. Naruto came walking up to the bridge, carrying apples. He tossed one to Sasuke and the other to Hinata. They both looked at him strangely. What? He said, his mouth full of apples. He swallowed it and continued talking. This is a survival test, right? So we're gonna need all the energy we can get. They both nodded and ate their apples. 2 hours later, Kakashi appeared in a puff of smoke, rubbing the back of his head. Sorry I'm late, guys. This fish was drowning and my mask was glued to my face. They all stared at him like he was insane before Naruto spoke up. That was the worst excuse I have ever heard, and I've heard some of your other ones. Now, today's test is going to be a bell test to determine if you get to become Genin. Hinata opened her mouth to ask a question before Naruto answered her. If they let every Genin graduate, then we'd have surplus of low-level ninja. The ones who graduate the academy are those who have the ability to become Genin. Hinata nodded, and Kakashi continued. My test, however, has a 66% fail rate. Before anyone could yell at him, he held up a hand. There are 2 bells. The one who doesn't get a bell goes back to the academy. You have until noon. Meet me at Training Ground 7. With that, Kakashi disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Knowing there was no time to waste, Naruto grabbed both Hinata's and Sasuke's shoulders and shushened to the training ground. As they approached the training ground, Hinata and Sasuke dashed to their hiding places. Kakashi reviews their hiding spots with a critical eye. They've hidden themselves well. This team might actually prove a dash. His train of thought was broken by Naruto shouting, "Hey, fight me." Kakashi looked at Naruto like he was crazy. You didn't know ninjas are about stealth, don't you? He asked Ninja Lesson 1, Taijutsu. Naruto threw a punch at Kakashi only for him to block it. He threw his leg into a spinning kick only to have Kakashi duck under it and get behind him. Never let an enemy get behind you, he said with an evil glint in his eye. Konoha's secret taijutsu, Senengoroshi. Naruto jumped 20 feet in the air, screaming in pain, only to disappear with a poof. Kakashi's visible eye widened. Does this kid know Kage Bunshin? He scanned around for his enemy, only to hear a shout. Above, Kakashi jumped back as Naruto slammed his fist into the ground where he had just been standing. The ground shuddered under the impact, and a fissure split the earth. Naruto smiled and turned to face Kakashi. I like you. You're actually challenged. He began making hand sign at speed Kakashi wasn't able to follow. He ended on Torai and called out the name of his Itsusa and Naijimizu-1. The air around Naruto began to waver, and Naruto's outline began to flicker and then faded away. Kakashi, thinking it was put his hands in a ram seal and shouted Kai. Norat's voice sounded from all around him. Don't bother, this is no Jinjutsu. Kakashi felt a sudden blow to the back of his head and stumbled forward, only to feel a knee impact him in the stomach. He stumbled forward, the wind knocked out of him. How was he doing this? Kakashi didn't have any more time to think as he felt a blow catch him in the chin, sending him spiraling into the air. Kakashi groaned There was no way he could substitute without knowing where he was being attacked from. He heard Naruto's voice again. This is my variation of no. It warps the heat around the target, causing the air to waver around them, hence its name Heat Mirage. Kakashi and Naruto whispered the name of the at the same time. Kakashi's visible eye widened as he realized the nature of the, if it's heat, then this should fix it. Making multiple hand signs, he called out the name of his. No. 2. Rain started to pour from the sky, and Naruto's warped and disappeared. Naruto's eyes widened in shock as he saw his cancellation, but quickly shook it off. Thinking quickly, he dashed back into the woods, searching for a hiding spot. Kakashi watched Naruto dash into the forest, keeping an eye on his chakra signature. His eyes widened as it suddenly vanished. No way. He's able to mask it completely? Kakashi thought. This is one interesting kid. Naruto dashed through the forest, cursing himself for being so careless. As the voice rang in his head, idiot. How could you think you could take him on alone? He isn't for nothing. Naruto growled. You need to go find the others. Together, you might be able to get those bells. Naruto protested inside his head, but there are only 2 bells. One of us has to go back to the academy if we don't get one. Listen, I don't think the test is about getting the bells at all. I think it's about working as a team. Naruto's eyes widened as he realized the true meaning of the test. Suddenly, he felt Kakashi's chakra spike and dashed towards it. Hinata was moving very cautiously through the forest, looking for Naruto. Hearing a rustle behind her, she turned quickly but saw nothing. Seeing something in the edge of her eyes, she spun quickly to see Kakashi standing in front of her. Hello, Hinata. The air began to shift slightly, signaling the start of the, and yet Hinata couldn't look away. Suddenly, Naruto dropped down from the treetops and landed in front of Hinata, shielding her eyes. Naruto-kun whispered to Hinata before fainting. Naruto gently set her against the tree before turning to face Kakashi. Kakashi, taking advantage of the distraction, launched a kick at Naruto. The kick caught Naruto in the side, sending him flying into a tree. The tree cracked, and there was a Naruto-shaped print in the tree. Naruto stood back up, brushing 3 bits off himself. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of metalback gloves like Kakashi had. Grinning, he pulled the gloves over his hands and slipped into a fighting stance. He rushed at Kakashi, throwing multiple punches with Kakashi either dodging, blocking, or redirecting them. Frustrated, he jumped back, pulling back his fist and channeling chakra to his hand. As he channeled his chakra, he began to make hand signs. He finished, grabbing his wrist. Flames burst to life on his hand. He held his hand to his face, the flames flickering. This is my very own original. Inferno Tenohira. 3. Inside his head, Kyubi snorted Kitch more like my original. He flashed through seals again, the flames on his hand flaring brightly. Kakashi's visible eyes widened. He'd seen those seals before. Naruto called out to him. Itsusa. The air around Naruto warped again, and he disappeared, but this seemed to have been amplified by Naruto's Inferno Tenohira. The air around Kakashi was distorted, and all he could see were vague outlines of things. He started to flash through seals for water, but was suddenly stopped by a searing pain in his chest. Naruto dispersed, and Kakashi looked down to see the blonde's hand slammed into his chest. There was a poof, and Naruto's eyes widened in horror. Kage Bunshin. Naruto tried to jump away, but found a pair of arms pin him down. Hinata's eyes flickered open, and she saw Naruto being attacked by Kakashi. I can't be afraid. Not anymore. She ran at Kakashi and got him in the arms with her, and he jumped away from Naruto, his arms hanging uselessly by his side. Hinata grabbed Naruto, who had been knocked unconscious by a kick to the head, and jumped away. As Hinata jumped through the trees, Naruto slowly began to move. Hinata stopped and set him against the tree they were on. Naruto-kun, you're awake. Naruto nodded his head and turned to face her. Kakashi's tough. We won't be able to beat him by ourselves, so we need to work together. And, as much as I hate to say it, we need Sasuke's help too. Hinata tilted her head. But if we don't get a bell, we'll be sent back to the academy. Naruto shook his head. Hinata, I don't think this test is about the bells at all. I think it's about teamwork. Hinata nodded at Naruto's reasoning. They were about to start looking for Sasuke when they heard the sound of heavy fighting. Naruto frowned. "We need to hurry. I think Kachi found Sasuke first." With Sasuke threw a kick at Kakashi but was easily fouled and began making seals for him, but was interrupted as Naruto and Hinata dropped down in front of him. They both struck at Kakashi, Naruto surprisingly imitating them. Kakashi was surprised that Naruto and Hinata were working together, and even more surprised that they were both using them. Naruto dropped low and cut Kakashi's legs out from under him, as Hinata caught him in the chin with a rising palm. As Kakashi flew into the air, Naruto jumped up after him. Appearing above him, Naruto slammed Kakashi in the stomach with a spiraling fist, sending him plummeting towards the ground. Hinata dashed under the falling Kakashi and slammed him in the back with a double palm. Naruto reached for the bells, but a sudden ringing stopped him. This was a proof, and Kakashi disappeared. Naruto stared in wonder. It was a shadow clone all along. Kakashi came strolling out of the forest, looking no worse off than if he'd been walking through a park. "Sorry guys, but you failed to get the bells." There was a sudden movement, and Naruto was tied to the training stump. Sasuke and Hinata stared in shock that someone could be so fast. After lunch, you will get another attempt at the bells, but no one unties Naruto or gives him any food. He gave Sasuke and Hinata 2 bento boxes and left. Hinata opened her box and handed Naruto an onigiri. Naruto grabbed it with his hand, but couldn't bring it to his mouth. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed it up and caught it in his mouth. "Thanks, Hinata," he said between mouthfuls. Sasuke just stared and shouted, "What the hell, man? Didn't Kakashi just say not to give Naruto food?" Naruto nodded but said, "If I want to fight Kakashi, we have to be at full strength, and those apples I brought you guys are not going to do it." There was a loud explosion, and Kakashi appeared in front of Naruto, his face filled with fury. "What the fuck did I just say?" he yelled, the exact picture of an angry god. "You all pass." Naruto's mouth hung open, and Hinata fell on her face. "All the teams I had before you guys never passed because they did exactly what I said, like mindless drones. Remember this, in the ninja world, those that don't follow the rules and regulations are called trash. But those who abandon their comrades are worse than that. They're scum." Kakashi cut Naruto from the post and helped him stand up. "Congratulations, you are now Team 7. A black shape raced through the forest with 4 shapes in fast pursuit. A voice spoke over the comlink. "It's cornered, moves to position, and captures." 3 shadows detached and moved into position. Avenger in position, Raven in position, Kishchun in position. Move in to capture the target. The shapes raced forward and captured the target. Kakashi's voice sounded again. "Check for the ribbon in its ear." Ribbon found. Lost cat Tora captured. The group turned and jumped through the trees. Hokage's tower. The group looked away as the daimyo's wife crushed the cat to her face. She turned and handed the Hokage money for the mission and then left the room. Naruto sighed exhaustedly. "They should turn capturing that cat into AC rank at least. We spent 4 hours chasing after that thing." Everyone nodded, and the Hokage laughed loudly before checking over a list of available D-rank missions. "Let's see, there's weeding gardens, washing windows, digging potatoes," or there was a loud shout of Tora, and the Hokage sighed, capturing the daimyo's cat. Naruto shook his head. "G-san, there's no reason for us to be doing these missions. These are chores that normal villagers can do." The Hokage opened his mouth to argue, but shut it again when he found that Naruto's reasoning was correct. He dug in his bin again and pulled a C-rank scroll from its depths. Turning around, he handed it to Kakashi. "Your mission will be to guard Tizune-san on his way back to Wave. He fears he will be attacked by bandits or thieves. Tizune-san, you can come in now," he called. The door opened to reveal an old man who smelled of alcohol, which was proven by the large bottle of sake in his hand. He turned to the Hokage with a surprised look on his face. "These are the ninjas that are going to protect me?" They all look wet behind the ears, especially the one with the blonde hair. "He looks like an idiot." Naruto simply smiled and said, "That being said, I can kill you in any one of 8 vital targets right now, before you'd even be able to blink." Tizuna's eyes widened, and Kakashi looked at Naruto. "You do realize that killing the client is against the mission, right? Everyone head home. We'll meet in the morning at the bridge around 6 a.m. He disappeared in a swirl of leaves, leaving everyone to wonder where he'd gone. Naruto turned around to face Hinata. "Hinata, do you want to go train before the mission?" Hinata nodded, and he took her hand before disappearing in a burning Shushin. Sasuke sighed and walked out the door as the Hokage stared. No one's been able to do that in years. Training Ground 7. Naruto and Hinata appeared in the middle of the training ground, Hinata a lot calmer than last time. Naruto smiled and drew his sword. "Now we'll train with weapons." Hinata nodded and pulled out her scroll, unsealing the scythe within it. Naruto spun his sword, slipping into a crouching position with the blade of the sword resting on his index and middle fingers. Hinata grasped the scythe with both hands, facing the blade towards Naruto. Naruto slipped out of his stance as he remembered something. Focusing chakra to his fingertips, he coated the edge of his sword in chakra, blunting it. The chakra dissipated, and Naruto's sword appeared the same as before. He motions for Hinata to give him her scythe. He blunted the edge of her scythe with chakra and handed it back to her. "What did you do in Naruto-kun?" "I blunted the edges with chakra so that we don't cut ourselves to pieces while we train with them, but they can still break bones, so be careful." They both slipped into their stances again as a wind blew through the training ground, rustling the trees. They both watched a single leaf float to the ground, waiting for it to land. As the leaf touched the ground, both Naruto and Hinata raced at each other, connecting with a muted thud. Naruto pushed his sword against the metal handle of Hinata's scythe, trying to push her focused chakra to her feet and keep her feet firmly on the ground. Naruto jumped back from the deadlock and leveled his sword, rushing forward in a stabbing stance. Hinata leapt into the air to avoid the attack, using her built-up chakra to jump higher than normal. Naruto jumped after her, and they clashed in midair. Naruto flipped over her to get behind her. As he was upside down, Hinata's scythe came at him, and he blocked it with his sword. Naruto completed his flip and landed on the ground before rushing at Hinata again. Naruto swung his sword, and Hinata brought the handle of her scythe up to block the blade. Naruto's blade slammed into the scythe before he flipped over his head. As he came down, he swung the blade at Hinata's head, but she ducked and swung the blade of the scythe low to catch him in the knees. Naruto stuck out a hand, balancing on the flat of the scythe in a handstand. With a push, he flipped himself off the blade and landed in front of Hinata. Naruto raised a hand to stop Hinata before she attacked again. He panted and rested his hands on his knees. He looked at her and shook his head in wonder. "That was amazing. I haven't been this tired in a long time. You're amazing, Hinata," he said, still doubled over. Hinata blushed at his praise and sealed her scythe again. Naruto sheathed his sword and sat down against the training stump behind him. Hinata came and sat next to him. He looked over and smiled at her. He pulled a scroll out of his back pocket and unsealed it to reveal 2 bento boxes. He handed one to Hinata, and they started to eat lunch. There was mostly silence, but it was broken with occasional comments like, "Wow, this is really good." He leaned back against the stump and watched the clouds. Hinata leaned onto his shoulder and watched the clouds float by. After a while, he got up, noticing that the sun was starting to drop. He took her hand and started to run towards the Hokage monument. Hinata managed to ask as they ran, "Where are we going?" Naruto's only reply was to look back and smile at her, saying only, "You'll see." They reached the top of the Hokage monument as the sun started to set. Hinata started to ask why they were here, but Naruto only pointed and said, "Look." Hinata turned to where his finger was pointing and gasped. The sun had started to go down, illuminating all of Konoha. The sky had turned pink, but was glowing red at the edges. The two sat and watched the sun go down. When it had completely disappeared, Naruto stood and offered his hand to Hinata, helping her up. "Hinata," he said softly, "you need to get home." Hinata's eyes saddened, and she started to head towards the Hyuga compound. Naruto walked with her, matching her stride. As they walked, they talked about small, inconsequential things. As they neared the gate, Naruto stopped. "Goodbye, Hinata," he said. "No, Naruto-kun." The sadness was clear in her face as she turned and opened the gate. Naruto turned and walked back towards his apartment. The next morning at the bridge, 7:45, Naruto walked towards the bridge to see Hinata, and Sasuke was already there. He walked towards them and smiled. "Ohayo, Hinata, Sasuke." "Ohayo, Naruto-kun." Sasuke merely nodded. Kakashi appeared in a puff of smoke, with Tazuna close behind him. Giving an eye smile, he rubbed the back of his head and said, "Sorry I'm late. There was this fish that was drowning, but my mask was glued to my face, so I had to instruct Tazuna-san on how to do it." Everyone stared at him with blatant looks of disbelief. Tazuna shook his head. He'd heard some lame excuses, but that one was terrible. Finally, Naruto spoke up. "Kakashi-sensei, that one was just terrible. I mean, it's like you weren't even trying." Kakashi simply gave an eye smile and walked towards the village gates. A few hours towards Wave, Naruto and Hinata were walking together, talking about small things. Naruto looked to his right and saw a puddle. It hasn't rained in days, which means that's probably no bandit could cast such a thing. There are enemy ninjas hiding from sight. Naruto's hand slipped to the sword he had moved to his hip, but made no other moves. Kakashi saw that Naruto had noticed and allowed himself a small smile. As they stepped past the puddle, the ninja exploded out of the puddle. They wore horned headbands with Kiri emblems on them, and wore claw gauntlets that were connected to each other but a serrated chain. The two ninja wrapped the chain around Kakashi, and with a pull, tore him into pieces. Hinata screamed as the two came towards her with their claws raised. Naruto appeared in front of her and knocked the claws away with his sword. He jumped to the right, leading them away from Hinata. One of them shot the gauntlet forward in a punch. Naruto ducked the blow. While turning, as he finished his turn, he brought the blade of his sword across the stomach of the shinobi. As Naruto came back up, he switched to a reverse grip and cut the man completely in half. The other shinobi's eyes flashed with fear as he turned towards Tazuna instead. As he lunged at Tazuna, Naruto appeared next to him and slashed downwards, his sword flashing in the sun. The man screamed as his arm hit the ground with a wet thud. Naruto slashed once more, and the man fell silent, never to speak again. Tazuna, Sasuke, and Hinata all puked at the carnage left before. Kakashi came strolling out of the woods, looking at Naruto with a raised eyebrow. Naruto simply shrugged and wiped his blade on the grass. As Hinata regained control of herself, she raised her head to Kakashi. "Kakashi-sensei, how did you survive? We saw you get cut into pieces." Kakashi jerked his thumb over to where he had died. Sasuke and Hinata both looked only to see a cut-up log. Kakashi turned to Tazuna with a serious expression on his face. "Tazuna-san, you need to start explaining now." After Tazuna had finished with his guilt trip about the poor state of the wave, Kakashi turned to his team. "What do we do? This is clearly a higher-ranked mission than he paid for." Naruto shook his head. "We can't just abandon him. We have to complete the mission." Both Hinata and Sasuke nodded, and they continued toward the wave. After they had been walking for a while, Naruto heard a rustle in the bushes. Dropping down a kunai held in his sleeve, he threw it at the bush. As he parted the bush, he saw a bunny, the kunai embedded an inch above its head. Naruto turned to face everyone else. This is a white bunny, which means it has been bred in captivity, which also means that it's probably Naruto's danger sense went off, and he and Kakashi threw themselves to the ground screaming, "Get down." A giant Zanbato whirled over their heads and slammed into the tree in front of them. There was a swirl of leaves, and a figure appeared on top of the figure wearing arm warmers of the camouflage in Kyumo. He wore normal shinobi sandals and regular ninja pants. He wore a leather strap across his back to hold his sword, and bandages coated the lower parts of his face. Naruto's eyes widened as he realized who this was, and he and Kakashi spoke at the same time. Momochi Zabuza, a rank Nukenin from the Kirigakure no Sato, wanted for the attempted assassination of the Mizukichi. Kakashi looked at Naruto, surprised that he knew so much. Zabuza chuckled darkly. "Then it seems my name precedes me." Kakashi glared at him and raised his hand to the forehead protector covering his right eye. "Then it seems that I'll have to go all out." He raised his forehead protector, and Zabuza laughed. "Oh, I get to see it so soon." Copy Nin Kakashi, wielder the Sharingan. Sasuke stiffened and thought to himself, the Sharingan, but that only belongs to Uchihas. Why does he have it? Zabuza backflipped towards the water, tearing his sword from the tree with a rip. He landed on the water and put both hands in the half-ram seal, one at body height and the other above his head. He called out to him. No, a heavy mist rolled in from under his feet, dropping visibility to absolute zero. A voice sounded from all around them, stating the 8 killing points: larynx, spine, lungs, liver, jugular, subclavian artery, kidneys, heart. Now then, let's see how many I could get in one go. Naruto heard the sword slicing through the mist behind him and spun, unsheathing his sword to block the massive blade. He focused chakra to his feet to help keep him on the ground, but the force of the strike was too powerful, and it blew him backwards. Naruto was shocked by the power and the force of the swing. There's no way someone could be that strong, and he only used one arm. Naruto shakily stood, using his sword to help him stand. He heard Zabuza laughing in front of him, and looked up. Zabuza stood laughing, his massive sword slung over his shoulder, and Naruto's headband clutched in his hand. Zabuza stared coldly at the boy. You don't deserve this headband, boy. He spat the last word, as if it were something vile. Naruto's eyes narrowed, and he formed a cross-shaped seal with his hands. Kakebunsin no. 6 Narutos appeared, swords held in varying stances. As he got ready to charge Zabuza, he saw Kakashi appear with a kunai to Zabuza's throat. Your opponent is me, Kakashi said. Zabuza laughed and said quietly, you failed, Kakashi. He splashed into water, and Zabuza appeared behind him and slashed him in two with a sweep of his Kubikiri Hocho. Kakashi splashed into water, and Zabuza's eyes widened in surprise that he'd been able to copy them in such a dense fog. Zabuza ducked Kakashi's slash and pivoted on the hilt of his sword. He smashed Kakashi in the chest with a vicious kick, sending him flying into the water. Zabuza appeared next to him and started making hand seals. When he stopped, he called out, no, water prison, I think that's how you spell. The water around Kakashi formed a bubble, trapping him. Laughter sounded from above them, and Zabuza jumped down out of the trees. He looked at Kakashi and said, so the great Kakashi was trapped by a Mizu. To be honest, I expected a bit more. Everyone's eyes widened. It had been a Mizu Bunshin all along. Zabuza turned and stared at all the genin and Tizuna. With a small chuckle, he said, and now it's time for you to die. Naruto walked over to where the Mizu Bunshin had been dispelled and picked up his headband, tying it around his neck. His metal back gloves scraped against the protector, scratching it. But he shakily stood, swaying on his feet. He held his katana in a reverse grip, the blade pointing towards the ground. Naruto moved at Zabuza, moving from side to side. As he reached Zabuza, he swung his katana, but Zabuza swung his Zanbato and cracked him in the head with the hilt, sending him flying backwards. He rolled before coming to a stop against a tree. Naruto propped himself up on his sword and stood again. Hinata screamed for him to stop, but he paid no attention. His hand clutched his sword hilt so tightly that blood started to run down the blade. He moved again at Zabuza, moving much faster despite his injuries. He weaved back and forth, dodging Zabuza's sword blows. Zabuza threw a kick as the boy ducked, catching him in the face and sending him rolling into the tree once more. Naruto struggled to stand, but was only able to kneel. Zabuza laughed and said, I like you, boy. You'll be fun to kill. And who knows, after I kill you, and that boy, I might have some fun with that girl over there. Naruto's hand gripped tighter around the hilt of his sword, his blood now running onto the ground. Naruto's head was bowed, and his hair shadowed his eyes, but when he looked up, Zabuza froze. Naruto's blue eyes had become a brilliant white. The pupil was black and slitted. When he spoke with a voice different from his own, the voice of one who had seen many battles and killed many men. You will not touch her. I will not allow it. Now, Momochi Zabuza, demon of the mist, you shall pay for your sins. As Naruto spoke, his rage rose, and words sprang unbidden into his head. Swinging his sword, he screamed, rage and flare, Jigaku Ken, burning hellfire sword. There was an explosion of flames around Naruto, singing anything within a 20-foot radius. When the flames cleared, it revealed Naruto standing in a black Haori, and with a 9-foot-long sword slung over his back. The blade was as thick as Zabuza's, but was pure black. On the blade, there were red kanji spelling hellfire. Naruto raised his head and looked at Zabuza. "Here is where you die, Momochi Zabuza," he screamed, rushing at his opponent as the blade glowed red. Naruto rushed at Zabuza with a speed he shouldn't have been able to move at, carrying that huge sword. Naruto smashed down in a vicious two-handed blow on Zabuza's sword. He jumped back and leveled his sword at Zabuza. Zabuza's eyes grew wide as flames flickered over the length of the blade. Naruto held the sword in a reverse grip, the edge of the sword touching the ground. Naruto raced towards Zabuza, the sword leaving a trail of fire as it scraped along the ground. Zabuza brought his sword up in a horizontal block to block the diagonal slash that was coming. Naruto saw this and instead swung his sword low over the ground, aiming for Zabuza's knees. Zabuza jumped over the slash, barely dodging the fire that emanated from the sword. Naruto completed his spin, using the momentum from the attack to come down in a crushing vertical slash. Zabuza managed to bring his sword up to block the blow, but the sheer force of the blow depressed the ground into a crater about a foot deep. Kakashi watched in amazement as Naruto fought on par with an A-class Nuke-Nin. Zabuza pushed the sword back and used the break in Naruto's guard to aim a horizontal slash at his stomach. Naruto knocked the blade down with a slash from his sword and pinned it under his foot. Zabuza gave a jerk that flung Naruto off the blade and up into the air. Naruto flipped in midair and rightened himself, coming down with his sword over his head. Zabuza sidestepped, and Naruto's sword slammed into the spot where he had been standing. Naruto swung his sword sideways and almost got Zabuza in the side. What Zabuza forgot was the trail of flames emanating from his sword. The flames seared past him, singing his skin. Zabuza stopped any possible burn with quick water. Naruto flipped over him and aimed a slash at the back of Zabuza's head. Zabuza lashed out with a kick and caught Naruto in the stomach. Naruto flew toward the tree, but he flipped and pushed his legs against the tree, using it as a springboard to come back with an even faster attack. As Naruto flew towards Zabuza, he saw Zabuza bring up his sword in a wide block, using the full width of the sword to his advantage. Naruto frowned as he saw that he wouldn't be able to break through that guard, but perhaps he didn't have to. Naruto did a front flip so that he was coming at Zabuza's feet first. As soon as he felt his feet connect with Zabuza's sword, he flexed his knees, absorbing most of the momentum. He pushed off the sword and landed a backflip. Unfortunately for Zabuza was that all that momentum went to him, which was exactly what Naruto was hoping for. The force of Naruto connecting with his sword knocked Zabuza off balance, breaking his guard for an instant. Naruto knew that he wouldn't be able to attack with a sword swing that fast, so he dashed forward and punched Zabuza in the stomach, winding him. Naruto followed up with a roundhouse kick to Zabuza's face, sending Zabuza bouncing across the water like a skipping stone. Zabuza forced chakra out of his body and frightened himself, standing on the water. He flashed through a lot of hand seals, and on the 44th, he jumped into the air and called out the name of his. Suryuda no Jutsu. A large dragon made of water rose from the lake under Zabuza and rushed towards Naruto. Naruto focused Ryatsu into his hand and ran his hand over the blade, forcing it into the runes, making them glow blood red. He swung his sword and called out, "Ken, Hellfire Sword, flare!" A large blade of fire burst from his sword. Steam erupted as fire and water fought each other. Naruto swung his sword, the pull of the wind blowing away the fog. Zabuza jumped onto the lake and made multiple hand signs. As he stopped, he called out, "Daibakufu no Jutsu." The water around Zabuza swirled and shot forward at an impossible speed. Everyone who watched opened their eyes wide. There was no way that Naruto could dodge this. Naruto closed his eyes and after a moment snapped them back open. He channeled more Ryatsu into his sword and held it high over his head in a plunging position as the water flew towards him. As the water came upon him, he plunged his sword into the ground yelling, "Jigaku, Ken, Katsu." Hellfire Sword explode. There was a giant explosion of flame. The water that had been coming at him hissed and turned into steam. Zabuza appeared behind Naruto and swung his sword, aiming to cut him in half. Naruto spun and smashed into Zabuza's blade with the hilt of his sword, knocking the blow off course. Zabuza used the momentum and twisted his sword, bringing it down towards Naruto's head. Naruto brought up his sword and blocked the blow, the two massive blades fighting with each other for dominance. Naruto ran his sword down the length of Zabuza's blade. Zabuza's eyes watched the progress of the blade, because once it got far enough down, he would be able to strike. As Naruto neared the end of the blade, he spun to the right, his blade leaving Zabuza's. Zabuza was still putting pressure on his blade, and it slammed into the ground. Naruto lashed out with the flat of his blade, smashing Zabuza in the ribs and sending him skidding across the ground. As Zabuza tried to stand, he groaned as he collapsed to the ground. Naruto had broken 5 of his ribs with that blow. He was finished. Naruto walked slowly towards Zabuza, his blade consuming more and more of his Ryatsu until the blade was covered in flames. Naruto slowly raised his sword. The flames on his sword leapt hungrily into the air, becoming larger with each second. As Naruto was about to strike the final blow, 2 needles impaled Zabuza in the throat, and he fell to the ground, lifeless. There was a swirl of leaves, and a boy of about 13 appeared over Zabuza's corpse. The boy had on a Hunter Nin mask that completely obscured his face. The boy threw A, and the clone holding Kakashi dispersed. "Thank you for fighting him. I have been tailing him for quite some time." The boy hoisted Zabuza over his shoulder and disappeared when Naruto looked straight at him. Aren't Hunter Nuns supposed to destroy the body on the spot and bring back something as proof that they killed their target? The boy shrugged and disappeared in a swirl of leaves. "Damn it, he got away," cursed Naruto, slamming his sword into the ground. The Ryatsu faded from his system, and his clothes returned to normal. Kakashi stood, swaying slowly. Naruto took a step forward and suddenly felt pain pulse through his body. He fell slowly towards the ground, thinking, "I must have overdone it." He hit the ground with a thud, and Hinata rushed forward to check on him. Thankfully, he was just exhausted from his fight with Zabuza. His heart and pulse rates were normal. Kakashi took a step forward, and he too fell to the ground. "I must have been without oxygen for too long." Hinata checked on Kakashi as well, and found that he would be fine in a couple of days. Sasuke couldn't move. How could Naruto have gotten so much power to be able to take on an A-rank Nuke Nin and win? Just who is he? At Tazuna's house, Naruto awoke slowly, squinting his eyes against the bright sunlight. He slowly lifted himself out of the bed, not knowing where he was. He saw his saw leaning against the wall, a katana once more. He belted it on and walked out to the kitchen. He saw many people seated at a table. Kakashi, Hinata, Sasuke, Tazuna, and 2 other people he didn't know. A child and a woman with long, black hair. Kakashi waved at him, and Hinata gave him a good morning. His throat felt as dry as sandpaper. He managed to ask, "WH, where are we?" Tazuna smiled and pointed to himself. "Why are you at my house, boy?" Kakashi stood up, and Naruto noticed that he was on crutches. "Kakashi-sensei, what happened to you?" Kakashi just rubbed his back and smiled. "It seems that my body was deprived of oxygen for too long." Naruto nodded. Kakashi turned and faced everyone. "All right, first we'll eat breakfast, and then we'll train. The attack that Hunter Nin did on Zabuza more than likely simply put him in a near-death state instead of killing him." Naruto turned before anyone could ask questions. Senbon, being primarily used in acupuncture, have a very low kill rate. Only a direct hit to a vital organ would have any hope of killing someone. Everyone nodded and sat down to eat. The boy sitting at the other end of the table glared at Naruto. Naruto ignored him and kept eating. Finally, the boy stood from the table and stomped up the stairs. Naruto raised an eyebrow, but did nothing. A clearing in the forest. Kakashi stood in front of the 3 of them, and finally he spoke. "Today, you'll be learning to climb trees." Everyone nodded, waiting for the other part of the instructions. "You will need to focus chakra to the soles of your feet to keep from falling off the trees. Too much, and the tree will repel you. Too little, and you won't stick to the tree at all. Do it like this." He turned and focused chakra to the soles of his feet, walking up the tree, crutches and all. Naruto looked at Kakashi as he hung upside down from a tree branch. Kakashi pulled 3 kunai from the pocket of his pants and threw them to the 3 on the ground. Naruto caught his, spinning it by the loop on the handle. Hinata and Sasuke simply leaned down and pulled their kunai out of the ground. Team 7 focuses chakra to the soles of their feet and dashed towards the tree. Naruto made it about 10 steps up the tree before he slipped and fell toward the ground. He hit the ground with his hands and pushed off, doing a kip up and landing on his feet. Sasuke only made it around 5 steps before the tree cracked, and he was propelled backwards. They sat on the ground until they heard a giggle from above them. They looked up to see Hinata sitting on a tree branch about 30 feet up, the kunai stabbed into the trunk of the tree. It makes sense because she would have to have perfect chakra control. Kakashi chuckled to himself. Naruto looked up at Hinata, not with jealousy, but with pure admiration. Hinata blushed under his stare and jumped down to the ground. Naruto smiled at her. "Good job, Hinata. Do you think you could help me out a bit?" Hinata nodded. With his massive chakra stores, of course, it would be difficult for him. As she helped him, she asked him a question that made him stiffen. "Naruto-kun, what happened back there with Zabuza? Naruto turned to her and shook his head. "I can't tell you right now, but I will." Hinata knew that answer was going to be the best she would get and continued teaching him. He didn't seem to understand that the Byakugan could see through everything, including his henge. But she'd tell him that later. After a few pointers, Naruto tried tree walking again, this time making it more than twice the amount he had last time. He marked the spot where he slipped, already high above Sasuke. Sasuke knew he needed help, but was far too proud to ask for it. After many hours of training, they trudged back towards the house. Naruto, especially tired since he had used 1,000 Kage Bunshin to help him in his training. As they sat down at the table, Naruto noticed the boy glaring at him again. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. "You got a problem with me or something, kid?" The kid slammed back his chair, standing up. He shouted, "Why do you try so hard? There's no possible way you can beat Gato. He'll just kill you all. You come to this town, you don't know anything about what's going on here. You always act so carefree and happy. You have no idea what suffering is, what my life has been like." The last sentence struck a nerve. He jumped up quickly, shoving his chair back so violently that it cracked against the wall. He laughed without mirth, a cold, dark laugh that seemed to echo throughout the eyes slitted. "I don't know what suffering is. My entire life, I've been beaten on my birthday, had my apartment burned down at least 6 times now. Every day, until I was 6, I was beaten within an inch of my life. I never had any parents. I've lived alone my entire life. And up until we became Team 7, I'd never had a single friend. Dante whined to me about how unfair your life is. You don't understand how good you've got it." He shouted at the boy. Inari shouted back, "You're right. You're probably just lying so everyone will feel sorry for you." Naruto's eyes flashed, and he tore off his shirt, revealing hundreds of crisscrossing scars. One particularly large scar ran from his left shoulder blade all the way down to his right hip. "Do you think I'm lying now? I have scars all over the rest of my body as well." He pointed to the scar on his back. "This scar was given to me by a shinobi wielding a katana, one of my own villagers." He pulled his shirt back on and stormed out of the house, sitting on the pier. Everyone stared in shock, still able to picture Naruto standing there with the scars all over his body. "Naruto-kun." All those scars, Hinata left the house and sat on the pier with Naruto. Naruto-kun wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug, intent on never letting him go. She cried on his shoulder, so sorry for all the things that had happened to him. He stiffened at her hug until he heard her crying. "She's crying for me?" He wrapped his arms around her in a hug, and for the first time in 8 years cried. Naruto's mindscape. Naruto stood in front of Kyuubi's cage, water lapping at his ankles. Kyuubi stood in front of him in his human form. He looked at Naruto and smirked. "Well, kid, you're very good with swordplay, but the fact remains that you know almost no ninjutsu." Naruto hung his head, and Kyuubi continued, "That's not to say that I couldn't teach you some." Naruto's head shot up, and his eyes widened. "How will you do that? I mean, you don't even have hands half the time." Kyuubi growled, and an explosion of red chakra blew Naruto backwards. "Do you forget who you're talking to? I'm the one that created the Sharingan, aren't I? What do you think I do in here all day? This place is boring as shit. Kyubi looked up, and a gleam appeared in his eyes. He flashed through multiple seals and landed on his final one. Naruto screamed in pain as seals appeared across his body. He rolled on the ground, slamming his head into the ground. Naruto finally stopped screaming and stood again. "What the hell did you do to me?" he shouted. Kyubi smirked and snapped his fingers. Naruto's seals glowed red, and he slammed into the ground. Naruto stood, finding it much harder. Naruto took a deep breath and said, "Let's try this again. What the hell did you do to me?" Kyubi answered him this time. "I covered your body in gravity seals. They'll only show here, though, so your friends won't see anything strange. They increase gravity's pull on your body, making your body weight twice as much as it normally does. I can increase gravity's pull with these seals, making them an excellent way to train because they train all of your body at once." Kyubi waved a hand vaguely towards all the water around them. "But first you've got to do something about this." "You mean change it? How?" "First, clear your mind. Let it become a blank slate." Naruto did as he was told, and the walls and floor became pure white, completely blank. "Next, think of what you want this room to look like." Naruto focused his thoughts, and a landscape slowly changed, becoming far larger than the room should contain. When Naruto opened his eyes, he gasped at what he had created. In front of him was a huge, behind him was a large plain, and to the left of him was a mountain range dotted with trees and even a waterfall. But to the right of him was Kyubi. Kyubi stared at his hands and walked around laughing. The cage had disappeared. Kyubi turned to Naruto, a smile clear on his face. "Thank you," he whispered, just loud enough for Naruto to hear. "Naruto, I'm going to teach you chakra control, Kenjutsu, and the works. The only problem is that this is only for mental training. It gives you the experience of training, but with no actual muscle buildup, meaning you'll only be able to train and practice here. It's a lot like your Kage Bunshin. However, even though we won't be able to build muscle here, we can build muscle memory, making it so that you do things almost automatically." Naruto nodded, his eyes shining at the possibilities of training in a place like this. "Naruto, I want you to create 100 Kage Bunshins and have them start to tree walk before we move on to everything else. That way you'll be training in one thing even as we train in another." Naruto put his hands in a ram seal and shouted Kage Bunshin no. 100 clones flickered into existence in front of Naruto. With a wave of his hand, Naruto sent them to practice tree walking. Kyubi nodded and started talking again. "First, we'll work on taijutsu. Keep in mind that you will be much slower with those gravity seals. This is only to get you accustomed to the weight. This will only be light sparring. You can't die here, but any injuries you receive here will still hurt, even if they don't affect your body on the outside." Both Naruto and Kyubi slipped into fighting stances, Naruto slightly off balance from the added weight. Naruto dashed forward, much slower than before. He threw a punch at Kyubi, but it was sluggish, and Kyubi easily dodged it, slamming Naruto in the chest with an uppercut. Naruto forced himself to stand, struggling against the added weight of the gravity seals. He threw a flurry of punches at Kyubi, all his punches either being blocked or dodged. Naruto didn't notice, but his body was slowly becoming accustomed to the weight of the gravity seals, his punches becoming slowly faster. Kyubi caught both of Naruto's fists and smirked. His knee flew upwards and caught the boy in the stomach. Kyubi let go of Naruto's hands, and he doubled over, coughing. When he had regained his breath, he stood upright, slipping into a fighting position once again. Naruto charged Kyubi and threw a punch. Seeing that Kyubi would easily block the punch, he dropped low and tried to cut Kyubi's legs out from under him. Kyubi simply raised the leg Naruto was aiming at and stomped down on the side of the boy's knee. Naruto rolled backwards, holding his knee and screaming in pain. When the pain had subsided, he stood again. Kyubi rushed at him, throwing his leg out in a snap kick that Naruto barely dodged. Kyubi swung his other leg, catching Naruto in the stomach. As his foot landed back on the ground, he launched a vicious knee rise that caught Naruto in the chin and sent him flying backwards through the air. Kyubi slowly lowered his leg and stood easily. Naruto was on his hands and knees, coughing up blood from where he had bitten his tongue. He slowly stood, swaying slightly. Kyuubi ran towards Naruto and slammed his knee into the side of Naruto's face, knocking him back onto the ground. Naruto shakily stood, coughing up blood. He dashed towards Kyuubi, throwing a flurry of punches, these much faster than the last. He threw a roundhouse kick at Kyuubi's head, but Kyuubi ducked and smashed him in the chin with a palm strike, sending him flying backwards. Naruto rolled and came to a stop about 4 feet away. Naruto stood up and faced Kyuubi, blood dripping from his face and body, but he still wasn't ready to give up. He raced towards Kyuubi, far faster than before, almost his normal speed. He slammed blow after blow of palms and punches, hitting Kyuubi with everything he had. He finished with a sweeping kick, knocking Kyuubi off the ground. He smashed a punch into Kyuubi's gut, making him cough blood. He threw another punch and caught Kyuubi in the face, sending him spiraling into the air. He jumped into the air above Kyuubi and hit him in the chest with a barrage of stomping kicks. He finished with an axe kick to Kyuubi's head, sending him flying towards the ground. He appeared below Kyuubi, smashing him in his spine with a fist. There was a crack, and Kyuubi slumped off his fist. Suddenly, red chakra enveloped him, and he stood again, looking as if he had never taken any damage. Kyuubi smirked. Well, it seems like you've gotten used to the extra weight. When you wake up, you will still be affected by the weight, but you'll know how much extra output you need to move normally. Naruto nodded, amazed at how strong Kyuubi had been. Kyuubi snapped, and a chalkboard appeared behind him, with a diagram of the human body, complete with chakra pathways, even some that Naruto had never seen before. Now, you know about the nature of chakra, right? Yeah, it's the manipulation of physical and mental energies, right? Most require a mixture of the two, plus hand seals to channel the chakra, and a name to unleash the chakra. But if you become good enough at a particular, all you will need chakra and hand seals to focus it. It presents a massive advantage in battle, because unless your opponent recognizes the hand seals you're using, they'll be caught off guard once you use them, thinking that you would have to say the name, giving them time to prepare. Naruto frowned. But if you need a voice to unleash, how does practicing help you not have to say the name of the? Look at it this way, what is noise? Vibrations in the air that are translated when they reach your ears. He answered, I don't know if that's right, tell me, and I'll correct it if it US sent. And if the voice is just a vibration, then if you match that vibration, what would happen? Naruto frowned, thinking, watch. Kyuubi made a few hand seals, and snapped with two. The field around him burst into flames. The flames quickly died down, leaving Naruto staring in awe as he figured it out. The vibration activates as he whispers. Kyuubi smiled. I knew you'd figure it out. He pointed to the chakra network of the person on the board and traced a path through the chakra coils. When a person channels chakra, it travels through these coils to get to the point in the body that the person is focusing it to. Depending on this, could be the hands, chest, throat, or feet. Some affect the environment around the person, and the chakra is expelled out of the body. Here he paused for a moment, then continued. However, human chakra systems are flawed. There are holes in the chakra coils, which causes much of the chakra to be lost as it travels to the point where it's needed. With the Ryatsu chakra and demonic chakra that runs through your chakra coils, you have larger tiers in your chakra coils than most people. With your amount of chakra, however, it doesn't really bother you. But if someone else had the amount of tiers in their coils that you do and tried to use them, they would immediately suffer from chakra exhaustion. Kyuubi frowned. When you channel chakra, for it tears your inner coils, making you lose a lot of chakra. You end up rupturing most of your chakra coils. If I wasn't healing them, as soon as you used yours, you'd probably be dead from the amount of damage to them. However, even with me healing them, most of the chakra you channel escapes through the holes, making it appear as a helix around your body. It won't happen here because this is your mind, but out there, he trailed off, thinking, I could send a pulse of demonic chakra through your system. What that would do is it would basically rebuild your chakra systems. It would tear your chakra coils, destroying. But with my healing, when they reformed, they would be intertwined with demonic chakra, strengthening them. The thing is that it would cause you incredible pain. You wouldn't die, but you'll wish you would just to stop the pain. I'll do it now, so you won't be awake for it. I can make sure you stay asleep, but you'll be feeling really bad when you wake up in the morning. On top of the pain, think of a hangover times 20. Naruto nodded. Do it. Red chakra pulsed around Kyuubi and then disappeared. He nodded, "It's done." To Zuna's house. Everyone woke up to a loud yell of pain. They all rushed to Naruto's room and burst open the door. They gasped as they saw what was going on. Naruto was covered in red chakra. The chakra pulsed and developed Naruto completely. Naruto opened his mouth to show rapidly growing canines. He screamed again as the chakra pulsed. The bed caught fire and he fell to the floor. The flames licked hungrily at him but couldn't get through the barrier of red chakra. There was movement along Naruto's muscles as the chakra built up his muscles, then a sickening crunch as they broke, which were immediately healed. The red chakra thinned and appeared as a transparent red barrier between Naruto, and then looked on in horror as his body rebuilt itself from the inside out. The mindscape. Naruto grimaced as he felt a twinge of pain but shook it off. Kyuubi noticed this, and his eyes narrowed worriedly. The chakras affecting him even in his mind. This might not turn out as well as I had hoped. Kyuubi shook his head to get rid of the thoughts and turned to Naruto. "All right, I'm going to teach you something that will help you greatly. It's one I created a long time ago. It's called Iron Hata, Iron Skin. It's a defense that blocks most attacks but consumes a massive amount of chakra, so use it carefully. Here are the seals." He flashed through a few seals, making Naruto copy them until he was sure that they were the right speed to actually be used in combat. As Naruto finished a set of hand seals, Kyuubi slipped into a fighting stance. "I'm going to attack you until you do it in combat. You can't block any of my attacks unless you use that. I'll give you a hint. Remember what I said about focusing chakra to different body parts." Naruto tilted his head, trying to think. He suddenly felt himself flying backwards from a fist planted in his gut. "Kyuso, guess I took too long thinking." Naruto fell to the ground, skidding to a stop in front of the stand, brushing stone fragments only to duck quickly to dodge Kyuubi's incoming kick. Shit, he's much faster than before. Just how much was he holding back? He was suddenly interrupted as a knee smashed into his solar plexus, sending him flying into the mountainside behind him. He's not giving me time to think, but then again, that's the point, isn't it? To be able to use it in a battle situation. He quickly jumped up, dodging a flurry of Kyuubi punches. He ducked Kyuubi's next kick and slipped behind him before jumping up into a tree. About to think, channeling chakra to the body, expelling chakra, that's it. He channels chakra all throughout his body and flashed through the hand seals and dropped down in front of Kyuubi. As Kyuubi's fist flew towards him, he finished calling out Eren Hata. There was a snap and then a yell of pain. Kyuubi cursed, grabbing his hand in pain. Damn it, he figured out. Red chakra enveloped his wrist, and then it was fine. The bone recedes back into the flesh. Kyuubi stood and smiled. "Well done, kid. You figured it out." Naruto smiled, and suddenly Kyuubi stood straight. "It's done. You're waking up." Naruto nodded and quickly dispelled his clones as he felt himself slipping away from his subconscious into the world of the waking. To Zuna's house. The first thing Naruto felt when he woke up was pain, lots of pain. He groaned and tried to sit up, only to be pushed back down. He struggled to open his eyes, but when he did, blinding sunlight filtering through. He closed quickly. He laid his head on the pillow that had been placed under his head and managed to croak out. "Close the blinds, please." The person obliged, and he opened his eyes again. "Hinata?" Hinata looked down at him, concern evident in her eyes. "Naruto-kun, you have to rest. You went through a lot last night," she said. He nodded, remembering what had happened the night before. After a bit, he pushed himself upright, pushing away Hinata's hand when she tried to help him. He shakily stood, his whole body racked with pain. He walked to the bathroom and looked at himself in the mirror. His eyes widened as he examined the second set of changes. "Your chakra did this?" He felt Kyuubi nod and looked closely. His silver-streaked blonde hair was now almost completely silver. His fangs had grown much longer, and he noticed that he was far more muscular than he had been. His red shirt had torn, and again he repeated the seals Kyuubi had used. There was a cloud of smoke in front of him, and a black shirt appeared in front of slipped it on, and walked out of the bathroom. He was startled by the loud hello of everyone at the table, but quickly shook it off. He took a seat at the table and began to eat breakfast. After a few minutes, Kakashi leaned forward. "Naruto, what happened last night?" Naruto raised an eyebrow, asking the man to explain. "Last night, red chakra covered your body. It increased your muscles' body mass. We heard your bones strengthen after they broke multiple times. Last Hinata looked at your chakra with the Byakugan. She saw that it was emanating from your stomach. What was going on? Naruto pretended to act stupid. I don't know, Kakashi-sensei. All I know is that I went to bed last night and then woke up this morning and my hair and body were like this. Kakashi knew that he was lying and pulled Naruto off to the side. Naruto, if something has happened, I'm ordering you to tell me. Naruto scowled and stared Kakashi in the eye. You have no right to tell me what to do. Not after that Raikiri of yours. Kakashi's eyes widened and he walked away. Naruto opened the door to the house and walked outside to train. The end. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.